You've heard the conventional view. Now prepare yourself to hear the other side. High school teachers Mike Margison and Justin Spears bring you the alternative view you didn't get in the classroom. Now here they are, Margison, and Spears.
Good Monday evening, everybody, and thank you for listening to The Other Side. Ways you can get in touch with us. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We have email, margisonandspears@gmail.com. Want to listen to the show? We're on the Cerberus Radio Network. A lot of good programming over there. Encourage you to check it out. You can listen to us on WCVLAM.com or on WCVL 92.1 FM, 1550 AM in Crawfordsville. I want to thank that station for all the support they've been giving us. You can also find us on our YouTube channel. Search Mike Justin, The Other Side Podcast, and all of our episodes will pop up there. You can also download our episodes on Google Play, on iTunes. Tons of different ways to get your fix for the other side. So I want to welcome in my other side of the other side. Justin, how's it going tonight?
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Having a pretty good day so far and really fired up about this topic.
Okay, so what happened, everybody? The Supreme Court came down with a fairly influential ruling. Actually, the ruling itself didn't turn out to be that influential, and we'll get to that later. But this was a landmark kind of case in today's society, and they just ruled on it this morning. And the situation that we have here was there was a baker in Denver, Colorado, and this incident took place in 2012. And what happened was a gay couple, two men came in who wanted to get married, and they wanted a custom designed cake for this baker. Now, the baker held the position that he was unable, for religious reasons, to participate in this wedding. And so he was unable to make the cake for them. The couple sued, saying that they had had their civil rights violated, and won, and pretty much won all throughout the appellate process. I don't think the baker won a single time until it got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled this morning 7-2 that the baker's religious freedoms were infringed upon by the commission's decision. And so he, in fact, according to the Supreme Court, was well within his religious rights to deny service to this gay couple. And this became since 2012, when this first came out, this became kind of almost like a national phenomena, where I can't say this for sure, but I feel like you had, there were stories that came up, and one here in Indiana where a gay couple wanted a conservative Christian owner of a pizza place to cater their wedding. And they said, you can come in, you can order pizza, we'll serve you just like any other customer, but we cannot participate in the wedding because it violates our religious beliefs. And then just blew the top off of everything. Some of you may remember that was Memories Pizza, I think, down south of Indianapolis. But I want to bring in Justin here to talk to us a little bit about who is right here from like a legal perspective. As looking at this from a government teacher's perspective, who's in the right here, Justin?
Well, this was so interesting as I kind of read through this. I spent a good chunk of day today kind of digging into some certain aspects. There's two things that I want to hit upon as I kind of break this down, obviously in true fashion with the other side. As you're going to read articles from Fox, CNN, MSNBC, Vox, all the mainstream media, you're going to pretty much read the same narrative here. And the narrative is going to be that the 7-2 opinion was a narrow decision. And what they mean by that, when you see, it was 7-2, how is that narrow? The narrowness in it is how the opinion, which is basically the way that the court communicates to society, what it believes here and what its ruling is the way that it was written by Justice Justice Anthony Kennedy. And basically what he said here is like, look, we're not necessarily saying that a person is allowed to discriminate against a gay couple. And one of the things that I'm going to hit on here in a minute is civil rights. But instead, what they really harped on, at least from my understanding, I have not read, obviously, the text of the opinion, just various different sourced reactions to it, is that Kennedy essentially said that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, was kind of overstepping its boundaries, so to speak, in the way that it came down against the cake shop owner, Jack Phillips, who, as you accurately described, said, "Hey, I can't do this because it violates my Christian beliefs here." So then you start to get into this whole question about civil rights versus the First Amendment, right to freedom of religion. And the case really does very, very little to kind of sparse, and kind of parse that out some. And that's something that we'll need to talk about here in just a moment. So that's really kind of the gist, be above and beyond what you had mentioned there was, what was going on with the ruling here. So as we kind of get into looking at this a little bit, again, kind of talking about the other side, as you read these things and you kind of say, okay, so what? What is this supposed to mean? How am I supposed to make sense of this? I think the first thing that we have to ask ourselves a question about here and really dig into is say, who is right? Whose rights trump? I always talk about this in the government class. When you allow for freedom, which I know is something that we hear, especially on the right, we hear a lot about freedom and liberty. But when you allow for a society where freedom and liberty are the rule of the day, you're going to get things like this. You're going to get two worldviews colliding and clashing. And the question that I always ask my class, and believe it or not, I get very little response because I don't think kids know how to think this through all the way. They're used to having somebody tell them, well, what should I believe? Just tell me what I should believe. Tell me what I should know about this, and I'll be good with it. The reality is that you have to think these things through. Does Jack Phillips' First Amendment right to practice his religion trump the freedom of two people being able to enter into a same-sex marriage, a relationship, and to have their rights upheld? And that's clearly what was at play here. Now, that's going to transition us into the civil rights part I'm going to talk about momentarily. Before we do that, though, I just want to wrap up and talk about one of the things that you won't hear very much or read. And Ryan McMacken with Mises wrote a fantastic piece today. If I get an opportunity, I will link this on our show notes page. I haven't done the greatest job with this to give our listeners resources to go follow up on. He wrote a fantastic piece that talked a little bit about private property. And you might think, how does private property enter into this? Well, it's really important, guys, that we understand and know that, and this ties into the civil rights thing, so I'm going to kind of segue into that. One of the things that we have to think about here are the natural rights that exist. And one of the most fundamental natural rights that we have are the rights that we have of private property. First and foremost, we own ourselves, right? We have complete ownership over ourselves. If we live in a free society with liberty and freedom, then we are free to do things so long as we are not interfering in physically harming somebody else. Now, you may have a dispute with somebody, and clearly even in a society where if you go to like an anarcho-capitalist or an anarchist would say, there's still going to be a role for judges. There's still going to be a role for mediation when there's disputes. But so long as you're not physically harming somebody and keeping them from being able to live a free life, then you're in good shape here. So you have first and foremost ownership over yourself. And that's essentially here, as you segue this into the First Amendment and talk about what is the role of the First Amendment. And again, going back to what I talk about in my classroom all the time, we have to, and I've hammered this home on previous episodes as well, we have to establish the Bill of Rights does not grant you or guarantee you, doesn't grant you, it guarantees protection of these natural rights. The right to be able to worship, the right to be able to speak, the right of a free press. These are not rights that we enjoy as people or in our society because government grant them and bestow them upon us. That is written, the First Amendment is written to protect us from the government and encroaching upon those.
Wait, so are you saying that the First Amendment is not written to protect us against bakers?
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's a legal system that one would go through if there was some kind of harm that was done, whether it be to your reputation, or obviously physically harm. If you walked in the cake shop and the guy says, "Hey, we're two gay men, we want to get a cake," and the guy just jumps the counter, starts beating the crap out of you. Clearly, there's protections there as well. And again, and this is something that I would like to get your perspective on here too. As I was reading through some of the reaction to this, Kennedy goes on to write in his opinion, where he talks about this whole idea of basically, we have to make sure that the First Amendment's guarantees is to be applied in a manner that is neutral toward religion. Well, that's not true. I don't understand what he means by that. That is not. I don't understand where he gets this idea that there has to be this neutral manner applied toward the freedom of religion. It's pretty abstract. It's pretty black and white. There is no neutrality here with this. This is that whole idea as we move a little bit forward here into talking about equality. There is no such thing as equality before the law. And what I mean by that here specifically is that there's nothing that tells me that I have to treat you equally. Now, the laws have to be applied equally. So in other words, if there's a law that says I have to do A, B, and C, then yes, I have to apply, that law has to be applied equally to all people, regardless of age, religion, gender, so on and so forth, which again, I have problems with that, because how do you, pick the categories that we, always hear about: age, religion, gender, physical condition. Okay, those are great. I'm not arguing that, but you could keep going on down the line and adding more and more things to this. That's another conversation for another day. Back to what I was saying here. There's nothing that says that I have to treat you equally. I can discriminate. The market is discriminatory. And he goes on to talk about how the market is not discriminatory. He has a complete 180 understanding of how the free market works. We as people discriminate each and every day in the decisions that we make, don't we, Mike?
Well, yeah, it would be like saying, do I have to treat McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King, and Wendy's equally? Yeah, as a patron, you know what I'm saying?
Right, absolutely.
I don't have to treat them equally. I can discriminate.
Sure.
I prefer Taco Bell. That's just me.
Right. And we discriminate on all kinds of things: price, location, type of product, maybe even it's the people. How many times have you talked to somebody and said, "Oh, the food there's okay, but I go in for the people. They're really good people." Or, yeah, that place is a little overpriced, but you know what? It's a locally owned business and I like supporting locally owned business. You are discriminating with where you choose to go and shop. Now, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, we hear the same mantra of age, sex, gender, religion, all that stuff. Okay, well, why not stop somebody from being able to discriminate because they want to shop local? Why not say, no, you have to spend X amount of your income at a retail big box store? That's discriminatory. Why not say, no, you have to shop at the place closest to where you live because that's where your tax dollars need to go? I mean, you could, carry this out to the nth degree. So Justice Kennedy's understanding of the way that the market works here, I think, is fundamentally flawed in understanding what, how discrimination works in the marketplace. And again, I know that probably hurts some feelings there when you hear that, but I just don't understand where, and what the end goal is here with forcing people to have to do this. That to me just seems like you're headed down a slippery slope if you want to try to apply that type of logic to this scenario here.
Well, I think that's an interesting point that you just made there, because let's suppose that the baker had malice in his heart, right? Mm-hmm. So he hated the gay couple because they were, let's just take it to the extreme, and then you force him to bake the cake. Has anything improved societally? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Has anything gotten better? The guy, he's still going to hate them. In fact, he's probably going to hate them even more. But forcing him to bake the cake, that doesn't do anything.
Well, and I think,
go ahead. No, I was gonna say, I think that there's going to be, I don't know this, but probably hundreds of bakeries in Denver who would gladly want to make the cake and go above and beyond and do whatever they could for this couple. But to force the one guy who doesn't that he has to do it and then say we're better off as a society. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Right, absolutely. And I was just going to add to that too, along the same line of thinking here is, you know what, if this guy makes this decision to do that, you mentioned the Memories pizza place. That place went out of business. That is the market's reaction to, look, this guy made a decision. He has to bear the consequences. I'm not here to take right and wrong sides here. The right and wrong is what the market bears out. So if you make a conscious decision to dig your feet in and say, my religious convictions tell me that I don't support what you're doing here, so I refuse to serve you, there's going to be consequences to that. Now, it may be positive, it may be negative, but whatever it is, we have to allow the natural forces of the market to determine that. If people are able to drum up enough support to say, we don't want companies like this in our community that appear on the surface to be intolerant, to be violating rights, things of that nature, then the market will respond and this guy will go out of business. But however, it could be the opposite. He could be, basically backed, and people say, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with you, but I do agree with you having the ability to put your foot down and say, I have a conviction, whatever it is. In this case, it happens to be religious, to say, I don't want to do business with you. And, again, you've got a lot of examples of that. And if the people were to say, that's what we think the market should be, then he should be allowed to be able to do that, and the market should speak to that. So again, I think that's an important thing that you're not really going to hear talked about much in reading through these mainstream media accounts of what this decision was all about today. Now, I want to transition here because one of the first things that I did was kind of dig into that. But then as I was reading through that, I kept seeing this common phrase used time and time again. Almost every article that I read about 5 different articles, obviously got perspective from the group that was representing Phillips, the baker, and he had, I forget the group that was defending Alliance for Freedom or something along those lines representing him. And of course, then the gay couple had a myriad of groups there. And obviously the one thing that I kept seeing from that facet, that camp, was civil rights, civil rights, civil rights. So I've done this before, but I thought, I want to go back and refresh. I spent the next, probably 20 minutes reading through, what are, I talk all the time about the civil rights movement. We oftentimes hear the civil rights movement. We think about civil rights, but do we stop to think about what are civil rights? And so I found an article here, and that I want to read just a brief. It's not really an article; it's more of a website post here from Fine Law that talks a little bit about civil rights. I just want to read part of this paragraph here to you, and then kind of go back and ask some questions related to this. Get you think a little bit about this. It says, protecting civil rights is an essential part of the democratic values of the United States. Everyone realizes that interfering with another's civil rights is a violation that creates an action for injury. But before you can protect your civil rights, you must recognize and know what they are. And I agree with that. That's a very, very good point. I'm glad they brought that up. That's what I was kind of looking for. Now, listen to this. However, articulating an exact definition of civil rights can be difficult to pinpoint because it is a very broad set of laws. Now, I want to pause there for a second, go back to what I talked about at the beginning. If you can kind of start to piece this together, what you should really kind of be thinking in your mind here is, okay, well, where do civil rights originate from? Civil rights originate from laws and actions that are taken on behalf of a government to essentially protect people in their culture and their society. And again here, I want to caution you from putting all your stock into that, because what we really need to be adhering to and what we really need to be focused on is what are our natural rights? What are our rights by virtue of existence? That does not come from government. The reason I make such a big deal about this, ladies and gentlemen, is because of this. If you allow yourself to fall into the category and camp of, well, I want the government to define what all of these civil rights are, if you fall under that spell of power, guess what? It can be taken away. Natural rights cannot, I mean, they are violated, but they should not be allowed to be violated. This is what the founding fathers wrote myriads of volumes on, talking about, Jefferson, for example, talking about, just going through and being vigilant of your rights, and Henry and all the other great thinkers of the American Revolution that talked about being vigilant, staying vigilant, guarding with jealousy these rights, and seeing the experience of what had happened, right, in Europe, and obviously the creation of our government here in the United States, is to say those are the rights that we really need to be focused on. Those cannot be violated. If they are, you have every right to overthrow the government for violating those. These civil rights, if you take these and say, oh yeah, I've got equal protection under the law, I got equal protection here, I got this group, that group, this group, and all this stuff. That is a very dangerous, slippery slope to be on. As this article says, it's hard to define that. Where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line in the sand here, and then 20 years later, you're redrawing it over there? Well, what if you take a step back? Very difficult. The article or website goes on to say, civil rights are an expansive and significant set of rights that are designed to protect individuals from unfair treatment. Again, guys, life is not fair. This whole notion and idea of fairness and equality just blows my mind. I don't understand and know where this came from. There is no way on God's green earth that you could ever institute a form of government where every single person in every township, municipality, state, whatever form of government you have is going to be treated fairly. It's not going to happen. They go on to say they are the rights of individuals to receive equal treatment and to be free from unfair treatment or discrimination. Here again, what did we just talk about? Our whole society is based on discrimination. Where you live, the job you go into, the people that you choose to associate with, the person you choose to marry. Do you have kids? Do you shop here? Every decision that you make in your life, you're discriminating, okay? And it goes on to say in a number of settings, including education, employment, housing, public accommodations, and more, are based on certain legally protected characteristics. Again, I disagree with that. They're not legally protected. You're inventing these. There is nothing in natural law to say that you shouldn't be able to discriminate whether somebody is able to participate in a education environment, an employment field. We discriminate based off of qualifications, right? I can't go and be a civil engineer right now. I can't go out and start building roads in my community. I'm not qualified to do that. That's the government stepping in and doing that. So again, I really encourage you to kind of think this through a little bit. You're, again, not going to get this breakdown. You're not going to hear this presented. You're going to see the words civil rights used in tandem with violation. Here, I'll just kind of talk to you a little bit about some of the groups you can go. Again, I'll try to remember to link this USA Today article. Reaction from GLAAD. Reaction from the ACLU. This is a clear violation of civil rights, a violation of civil rights, violation of the 14th Amendment. It goes on and on. Again, guys, think back to what we talked about at the beginning. These rights are protections from the government taking action against you, not from an individual who is free to choose. When you choose, you discriminate. When you discriminate, it's going to happen in society. It's not always a bad thing. Now, you could say, well, okay, time out a sec. Wait a second. It's okay to discriminate in keeping somebody out of a career field that clearly isn't qualified, but it's not okay to discriminate based off of sexual orientation or age. And I disagree with that. I absolutely disagree with that. What if allowing two people, let's say, who are in a same-sex relationship to be able to enter into an environment where that is not a part of the culture, not a part of the fabric of that society? As you talked about earlier, Mike, what's going to be the result there? It's not going to be cultural advancement. It's going to be very toxic for everybody involved. For obviously the gay couple who are going to feel ostracized and outcast, and for the other people who feel like they're going to be pointed to as the bully, the tyranny of the majority, so on and so forth. So again, I hope that makes sense. And I think what I want to kind of conclude and wrap up here with is this. You hear me say something like this, guys, please don't take this to hear me say, I think that these are second-class citizens. That's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. If a society wants to be free and welcoming and inviting and allow somebody, that's fine, but they've got to have that choice. You can't put a point in the barrel of the gun at somebody and say, you're going to take these people in, you're going to bake a cake for them, you're going to sell them this, you're going to allow these people to work here, you're going to allow these people to live here. Come hell or high water, the government and the entity that it is going to tell you what to do. That, my friends, is tyranny. And that is what we cannot allow ourselves to fall under.
Really, really good points there. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on just as you were saying them. When you were reading off the list of people who responded to it, GLAAD and USA Today or whoever, and at one point you had said it was a violation of the 14th Amendment. Man, this really gets me. Now, granted, I don't teach government and I'm not a constitutional law scholar, but I thought you made a good point when you said that the 14th Amendment, this is what people really need to understand. It does not say that you have to treat everybody the same. That is not what the 14th Amendment says. It does say that the laws need to be applied equally to everybody, no matter what you look like or who you are or how you act. The laws have to apply equally. But it does not mean that everybody has to treat everybody the exact same. And it's a common misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. Now, this was argued pretty consistently when whether or not gay marriage was constitutional or unconstitutional, or whether or not disallowing gay marriage was unconstitutional. They were, constantly invoking the 14th Amendment. And here is why this is really just a perversion of that amendment when you use it. Look, if we go back prior to, I think, 2014, before that, the Supreme Court decided that, that same-sex couples could get married now anywhere in the United States. If we go back before that, the rules were, I, as a straight person, didn't have the right to marry a man, and so, as a gay person, didn't have the right to marry a man. So the law was applied to us equally. Now, the 14th Amendment would be violated if the law said that I, as a straight person, had the right to marry a man, but so, as a gay person, didn't have the right to marry a man. That would be the law not being applied equally. It would be unfair. It would be unconstitutional. But you can clearly see that's not what was happening. Nobody had the right to marry a man. Again, this is prior, now that the laws have changed. But when the 14th Amendment is invoked like that, it really bugs me because it's really misinterpreted. The last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on was you addressed this a lot. You talked about civil rights, and this gets into some issues that a lot of people really don't like to talk about because it turns racial, and people are saying, well, okay, let's extrapolate this as far as it goes. And do you think that, a white person should be allowed to, disallow Black people from entering their restaurants and so on and so on? And they'll always take it to that. That's, kind of the natural end that they'll take it to. And I have to say, look, I see these stories sometimes when an employee decides that they're not going to serve a cop. I mean, have you seen these on the news from time to time? A police officer, a guy in uniform, will go into a restaurant and, the fast food worker, bartender, whatever, says, you know what, I'm not going to serve you. And it turns into this big hubbub, and everybody starts hemming and hawing, and Fox News starts, blowing it out, saying, oh, this is unacceptable. And look, if in the Black community, people feel like they are unjustly treated by cops, and they have a negative opinion of white cops, and they think that is a detriment to their own natural rights. And if there is a Black couple who really believes that they are targets, and they do not want to serve a white cop who walks into their restaurant, then absolutely, yes, I think they have every right in the world, and under natural law and under the Constitution, to say, yeah, we're not going to serve you. Turn around and walk out, go find another restaurant. Now, is that the way I'd run a restaurant? Absolutely not. I would invite anybody who has green money to come in. But do I support their look? If they want to do that, that's fine. If I want to open up a hot dog stand, Justin, you don't have any hair. If I wanted to discriminate against bald people, I might say, you know what? You can't get a hot dog from me, Justin, not until you grow your hair out. Go on somewhere else. Is the best way to run a business? Probably not. As far as I know, bald people love hot dogs. But look, I have the right to do it. Why? Like, who's going to tell me no? I can't.
Sure, absolutely. And then I have a right to go on, take my business somewhere else. I also have a right to say, hey, look, don't do business with this guy. I had a bad experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
yeah, you can put that type of like word of mouth, and I mean that goes a long way, especially in today's society. And say, look, this guy was a jerk to me. He said, and now my hot dog stand, I'm guessing, is probably going to be pretty high quality, so people will come anyway and tolerate the bad service. But you get my point.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to wrap us up for our radio portion of our show this week. Thank you for those of you that have supported us on WCVL AM 1550 92.1. We really appreciate that. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything, please, again, feel free to email us, Margeson, Margeson, and Spears, Spears, all one word, at gmail.com. We would really appreciate any feedback, support, questions, concerns that you have about the program. And thank you again to the folks over there at 92.1 1550 WCVL. Until next week, you have now heard The Other Side. All right, for those of you that are hanging on here for a little bit of bonus time on iTunes, Google Play, Spreaker, or YouTube, Mike, I wanted to kind of get into this, man, as you were talking about that. I've been kicking around in my mind here over the last couple of days. I saw a Facebook post the other day that kind of had something to do with kind of the end of school and the whole idea of what we were talking about last week with the teacher walkouts. And I think you made a comment, or I made a comment in the last episode about busing. And I just, kind of thinking a little bit here about, living in the suburbs of Indianapolis area. And, sometimes we kind of get that unfair rap, I think, of being exclusionary, of being closed communities. Man, I was walking around my neighborhood the other day. There is a ton of diversity in my neighborhood. Have you noticed that in yours? I mean, you live in, a semi-suburban rural area, right? I mean, you're in West Lafayette. I mean, your neighborhood, have you noticed that as you've moved into where you are?
Highly diverse.
Okay, so where I'm getting at with this is, when you drive through major metropolitan cities today, what do you not see? Diversity, right? Diversity has just completely, I mean, you'll hear people talk about, oh yeah, Chinatown, Greek town, Little Mexico, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about block to block, neighborhood to neighborhood. What are you seeing? There are some highly segregated inner parts of the inner city part of Indianapolis. And I'm just curious, as we were kind of tying this back to this episode here of what we were talking about, that's discrimination. That is people saying, you know what? I want to be with my people. These are the people that I have cultural commonalities with. These are the family members that I know. These are the friends that I have. These are the people that I work with, children go to school with, so on and so forth. That I think that is absolutely fine. I also think it's absolutely fine, and I appreciate and enjoy that when I walk around my neighborhood, I see no less than 5 nationalities, just to my knowledge. And listen, I haven't gone around and done a survey in all the houses in my neighborhood that I see different people in my neighborhood. I think that strengthens my community. I think it strengthens my neighborhood. I've got nothing wrong with that. So I just want to throw that out there, not to try to pander to or appease anybody, but I just want everybody that is hearing this to understand that what I was talking about in the idea of being able to discriminate, it's the choice and the freedom to do that. And to understand and know that there's consequences one way or the other to that we have to cherish and hold on to. Because if we are told no, You got to have this person live in this neighborhood. You've got to have these people going to this school. We've got to bust these kids in here. We've got to have representation from this group in this community, in this job. That is so dangerous. And I think hopefully people have seen that. You know, when you look at the University of Michigan, for example, right? They went through that big case there. What were they getting? Watered down admittances, right? Because they were quota fulfilling people into the university. And that hurts those who are qualified, even if they happen to be
those who were not qualified also.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I hope that makes sense, right? I hope that kind of resonates and makes sense to those that are listening to it, that I'm not necessarily advocating that people should be going around on witch hunts and ostracizing and you know, bullying or intimidating. But man, if somebody comes into your community, somebody enters into your work environment, whatever, you know, if you're the boss, if you're the owner, CEO, whatever it might be, I feel like you have the freedom and liberty to be able to say those values aren't consistent with what we've got going on here. You know, think about the Hobby Lobby case. You know, what good would it do to have Hobby Lobby be forced to have to, for example, say, hire Muslims into their work environment, or, you know, allow gays, you know, the opportunity to work in that environment, or have to do something that goes against what their convictions are, in the case that we know, provide birth control to their workers. You know, you see what I'm saying? I think that creates an even more toxic environment.
Well, yeah, when you force it on people, it's and you're right. Like, to your first point, like, people kind of naturally sort themselves based upon whatever they feel like sorting themselves based upon. You know, so sometimes they sort themselves by religion, sometimes they sort themselves by ethnicity, and sometimes people sort themselves culturally. But to have a third party, like an elitist, usually white government official, come in and say, no, this doesn't really meet my standards for composition, and I want these percentages to be X, Y, and Z, and this is what I want the neighborhood to look like, because this, you know, I mean, how arbitrary, that's even ridiculous coming out of my mouth. But to usually, you know, have somebody say that and then apply it and just say, go make it happen. This is not how people sort themselves. So we should let people sort themselves the way that they normally do. But yeah, and I don't think, Justin, that you had to, you know, go back and explain yourself, because look, in a free society, and you kind of touched on this in the beginning, in a free society, things are going to happen that other people find offensive. This is another thing that really bugs me. This term offensive, this has got to be taken out of the English language. It's got to be removed completely, because it is turned into anything that is not my absolute number one preference. Now, all I have to say is that I'm offended. And then if I'm offended, all of a sudden I have this right not to be offended. This is what people think, mainly millennials, but that's because it's, you know, just pumped into their brains by idiot teachers and college professors, that offending somebody is like the worst possible thing that you can do. Well, who knows? You know, anybody could be. How many people are going to be offended by just listening to this? But what does that mean? And why do they have that right to never be offended? Why would somebody have that right to just, you know, turn us off because they didn't like it? I can't think of anything really more audacious than that.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And on that topic too, you know, I was sitting in a waiting room today at a medical facility. And did you catch any of this hubbub about Bill Clinton and James Patterson?
I know they wrote a novel, right?
Yeah, well, so they're doing the interview circuits to promote the book, and they go on with NBC. And I don't remember if it was who it was that was interviewing them, but the guy starts, you know, kind of really grilling Bill on the Lewinsky scandal. And, you know, he's basically, from what I could kind of tell, you know, asking him about, you know, do you have any remorse? You know, what do you have to say, you know, when you reflect back on this? And And, Bill just gets all righteously indignant and immediately, starts jumping toward talking about Trump and trying to deflect, and just a really bad look, came across awful. And what this started getting me thinking about here, and I've noticed this a lot. You kind of were talking about millennials. I've noticed this more and more, even with like guys our age and older. I've heard this as people reflect back historically on things, whether it's something that happened 15, 20, 50, 100 years ago. I hear this all the time. It's a different time that we live in today. Today is different. Back then. I'm sorry. I always grew up under the impression that if something was wrong 50 years ago, it's wrong today. If something was wrong, like that, because otherwise, what are you doing? You're saying that truth evolves. Truth doesn't evolve. Truth from day one. The laws of gravity haven't evolved over time. Gravity has existed the way that it always does. And I don't want to get into scientific squabbling, but the laws of motion are the same today as they were 500 years ago, right? So this idea that, well, in the 90s, it was this kind of like sexual liberation, and hey, everybody was doing it. And, I'd almost kind of blame the guy for not having sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky, if he didn't do it. And, just all this like indefensible, just idea of like, oh, well, it was just a different time. I can't buy that. If it was wrong back then, it's wrong today. If it was acceptable back then, it should still be acceptable today. And you hear all these people talk about, well, being offended. That offends me now. That offends me now. Well, again, if it's something that offends you today, then it was offensive 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. You don't get to decide and redraw the boundaries and lines about what is offensive and what isn't, beyond just understanding, I think, as you said, there's nothing legally binding to keep one from being offended.
No, but I don't think anybody knows that.
Oh, yeah.
I honestly think that millennials probably think that there is that, and if you pay attention, if you look at the right outlets, sometimes you'll see polling on free speech absolutists, and it's like the vast majority of millennials today do not think that free speech should be absolute.
Yeah.
I mean, they just, and that is just stunning and sickening to me.
Dangerous.
I mean, it's unbelievable, and you can imagine that things are going to change if this is what the generations believe, that free speech can only be stuff that makes you feel good. Mm-hmm. And you know what I mean? That's what they believe free speech is. It's pretty sickening, actually.
Sure, absolutely. And as we've always talked about, what it boils down to is who's controlling the narrative. Because I could say, oh, well, BLM, Black Lives Matter, that speech is threatening to me. I want it shut down. I don't want to hear it. I don't want that. I want them to be able to speak their mind. I don't want them out like putting bodies in front of cars on the interstate and impeding commerce or everyday life. But if they want to hold a rally in a public forum and speak their mind in a lawful way, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem if they came into our town and, again, had legal permits, did everything on the up and up, and propagated their message. I wouldn't agree with it, but I would not go to any length to try to have them shut down. Again, once they cross that line, if they start violating private property, they start becoming a nuisance or anything like that, then it gets shut down. But to that point, I wouldn't want to shut anybody down. I certainly don't think I'm qualified to be able to say what is and isn't qualified as free speech. But you look at these speakers that are being shut down on college campuses, the safe spaces, all this stuff. You're absolutely right. It's a very dangerous proposition and a slippery slope to go down.
Well, name one liberal professor who has been shot down at or speaker. It doesn't. This is a completely one-sided issue. Yeah. It is the left against the right, 100% without exception.
Sure. And all they have to do is just say, oh, I took it a little too far, and then it all goes away.
Oh, yeah, that's gone. Yep.
Sweep it under the rug. They apologize. They clearly, we talked about that last week with the Samantha Bee thing. Yeah, you've got that kind of advantage, I guess, for lack of a better word, as someone coming from a liberal, left-leaning perspective. If you're on the right,
carte blanche.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
All right. Well, I think, Mike, that'll wrap us up for today. You have anything else that you want to hit on before we conclude?
No, I think we did a pretty good job here tonight.
Yeah, well, I hope that you guys find that episode enlightening and entertaining. Again, what we really try to do here with this, guys, as we do with most of our episodes, is just present you with some provocative thought, provoking things that you can go and kind of read back on and think about it, kick it around. Don't just read something, say, oh, yeah, that's right. Go back and say, wait a second. What is this? I want to learn more about this. And I hope, again, I always say, I'm not here to tell you what to think. You can hear what I have to say and disagree with it. But again, I try to, and I think Mike does a fantastic job of this as well, present this from a perspective that gets you to kind of think a little bit more beyond what you're going to get in that mainstream media perspective. So as always, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you listening to the show. Help us out, like, share, thumbs up, all that jazz. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, anything, we would love to hear from you. I've gotten some really great feedback on our Facebook page. That's always encouraging to see. But the best thing you can do to help grow the show is share it, like it out, comment on our stuff and everything. Give us a subscribe on YouTube. And again, we really appreciate taking the time to listen to our show. So that'll do it for now. And until next week, you have now heard The Other Side.